on the NewsChannel 5 network. This is Open Line.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Open Line. Look at this. We have a full house, and I think we're going to have a very good conversation tonight. As you know, we've been talking about criminal justice reform, juvenile justice reform. Tonight we have new voices in this important discussion, and I'm excited just to get right to it. I want to introduce Rahim Buford. He's the founder of Unheard Voices Outreach. We'll hear more about what that is, but you come at this from a fascinating point of view. You were in prison for 26 years.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. Dawn Harrington, National Council for Incarcerated Women and Girls, also the Executive Director of Free Hearts. You've been on before. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
And Dawn Diener, she is with Choosing Justice Initiative, and she's the former Metro Public Defender. Dawn, thank you for being here. And so the essence of what we're going to talk about tonight is, I guess, poverty and its impact on criminal justice, right? Mm-hmm. And Rahim, I guess, how do you want to start that off? Where are we right now when we're talking about these criminal justice issues and poverty?
Yeah, so when you're looking at the criminal legal system and the individuals who are housed in prison, some say inmates, I choose to say inside or a prisoner because we want to humanize people who make bad choices and those who don't make bad choices but get, for whatever reasons, we think is poverty, end up in the criminal justice system. And so why is it that your income or your socioeconomic status can determine your destiny? And so when I think about my own life and the 26 years that I was in prison, there was no one there who was wealthy. There was one person who could be considered wealthy, who was a doctor. But outside of that individual, everybody else was considered poor. And so we believe that there is a link to poverty and how individuals are microwaved through the criminal legal system. And we have some solutions, some alternatives that we believe are viable and that society should listen to, Nashville should listen to, Tennessee should listen to.
Well, you are the founder of Unheard Voices Outreach. What is that? What is Unheard Voices Outreach?
The Unheard Voices Outreach was born in 2005 while I was in a prison cell meditating, and I was thinking about how I could give value, how I could contribute to society. And this poem just started flowing through me. The title of it is Who Am I? And then like the third verse in one of the stanzas is, I ask myself, who am I? And I say, I'm representing the unheard voices. And I just took that idea and just added on to that. And 2 years after I was released from prison in 2015, I incorporated the Unheard Voices Outreach. And basically, this is to put a different face on what a formerly incarcerated person is and does. And this is to encourage leadership with individuals who leave prison so that those who may have been part of a problem can also be part of the solution. And even more, the real experts as it relates to what it takes to not only navigate the prison industrial complex, but also how do you successfully enter society and be a positive force. And that's what Unheard Voices aims to do in its advocacy, in its organizing, in its raising awareness about felinism.
Okay, raising awareness about that. Dawn Diener, as a former public defender here in Nashville, what do you think? The role that poverty plays in our criminal justice system. This is such a huge topic, but I guess bounce off what Rahim just said. You know, what are your thoughts there?
Well, I think what Rahim saw from his place at age 18 in the criminal legal system, charged with an offense and then going to prison and spending 26 years there, is exactly what I saw on the other side as a lawyer, representing individuals as an assistant public defender and then as the public defender. And the reality is that the people who we mostly see in the courtrooms in Davidson County and across this country are living in poverty. And so we have to ask ourselves why that is. And we have to ask ourselves, are we doing justice in the way that we handle those situations. And I think in my experience as a lawyer in the court system, we're not. They're complicated issues, from race, socioeconomic status. There's so much history that brings us to where we are today in our criminal legal system. But it is largely all rooted in poverty, capitalism, racism, sexism. And so I think the first thing we need to do is just kind of acknowledge the truth about that and start speaking about that. And once we can all acknowledge how we got to where we are, then it's how do we get ourselves out of this, and how do we move away from that to a system that is more just and more fair and more equitable.
We've been talking about juvenile crime a lot, juvenile justice reform in this series, Broken. We've had several people come on here and say the system isn't broken, it's doing exactly what it was set up to do. And what it's set up to do is bad, is messed up, is fundamentally flawed. And I guess I'm gonna ask you something here in a second, but is that kind of what you see? That we need to change some fundamental things. It's the system that is failing us. What do you think about that?
Well, I think I'd go back to what you just said, which is that the system's largely working exactly the way it was designed to work. And it is designed to largely keep people who are not in positions of power, people who are not in positions of wealth, where they are. And I think that the time has come for, and what Rahim's organization and Dawn's organization do so well, is organizing people to say, we are suffering and we're not going to stand for that anymore, and we want our voices to be heard. And there are compelling stories that need to be told. And I believe, and that's why my organization is called the Choosing Justice Initiative. I believe when people are educated about the real injustices that are happening, they will choose to do the right thing. And I think so many people aren't impacted at all by the criminal legal system. They aren't impacted at all by the oppression and the suffering that happens. They don't know about it. But I do believe that when people learn, and that's why shows like this are important, when people learn about the real injustices that are happening and how they can do things differently, they will choose to do better.
There is no motivation right now on the part of a lot of people to change things. People keep getting more and more scared, more and more concerned. They tighten screws or whatever, but it's fascinating what you said about it's designed to maybe keep some people poor and out of power. And so why would those in power feel motivated to change it? I guess that would be the essence of our question. And we can debate that as the night goes on. I want to talk to you, Dawn. What is it that your organization does? Again, Executive Director of Free Hearts. What is Free Hearts?
So Free Hearts is an organization that's led by formerly incarcerated women that provides support, education, and advocacy in organizing families impacted by incarceration. So that's just a long way of saying we do the direct service work where we go into the jail, juvenile, and prison, and we go into 10 different schools and work with children whose parents are incarcerated and deported. But the other side of the work is we work to advocate for policies that impact us and impact our communities. We were able to pass a state, well, I'll just back up, because the first time that we met was we were organizing claimants in Rutherford County from a privatized probation company that was criminalizing poor people in Murfreesboro, basically for their, that was sending them back to jail for not having the ability to pay, that was extorting people. People were starting off at the beginning of the year with an amount, coming at the end of the year not knowing, you know, how you're even owing more even though you've been paying the whole time. We met one of the lead plaintiffs in that case actually passed away. I mean, the last time I saw her, her arm was literally disjointed. And so after that, the next big win that we were able to do, we passed a state law that provided community-based alternatives to incarceration for primary caregivers. And so, yeah, that's what we do. Okay. And I'm sorry. And we also have a campaign that's going on right now that's called Decriminalize Poverty. It is not a crime. And it's just highlighting where it is a different system, whether you have money or whether you're poor.
Decriminalize poverty, and is that where we are? I mean, is that the essence of what I guess you're trying to get across here? Is that we have a system that in many cases has and does criminalize poverty? Is that, what do you mean by that? How do you see that?
Okay, so there's several ways to show that we have a system that criminalizes poverty. One of the main things that you can point to is the bail system. We have a system in which if you have money, if you are given a bail, then you're able to pay and buy your freedom. Most of the people that are in the jails in our state are only in there because they can't afford to pay bail. And you know, it's starting like well, not starting, but that's what's fueling the jail overcrowding crisis that's happening all across our state right now. But there's other ways that we look at the tenants, just like we were there last time with the privatized probation company. They were criminalizing poor people. When we look at driver's license fines and fees, and people not having the money to pay their driver's license, well, they have to go back and forth to court. And I mean, they have to go back and forth to work in order to pay for, this driver's license. But if they get caught, now you have driving on suspended, now you have a driving on revoked. That could be a violation to probation, and there you go. We also have where you can't vote unless you've paid your fines and fees. The only thing that's holding you back from being able to vote is fines and fees. We have so many legal financial obligations, even child support. We spoke with the governor about the criminalization of poverty, all of us, and then several other Tennesseans that came in on that meeting. And, our state government is like, we don't want to leave the single mothers out, but when we go into the jail and we're saying, what's wrong with this law, different pieces of proposed legislation, hands going up left and right. What about child support? I have child support that's in the tens of thousands. My child is almost 30. I'll never be able to pay this. I can't, and that bars you from a bunch of other things. So the criminalization of poverty basically shows all the tenets of the spider web that makes it a different system, and I do agree that the system is created the way it was meant to be, to keep you in this spider web, whether you have money or whether you don't.
And so how do we get at it? I mean, how do we change that? Mm-hmm. We had someone named Robert Sherrill on last night. It was fascinating. He was in prison for a time, and he's a business owner, and he was concerned that there's not a great deal of motive at the top to change things. What do y'all think? What do you think, Rahim?
Well, I want to at least make a comment about what Dawn Harrington just said about the criminalization of poverty as it relates to the front end of the criminal legal system, and we were talking about bail. I'm also the Nashville Community Bail Fund manager. I've gotten out or released gotten 700 and something odd people out of jail, right? We've bailed out nearly 1,000 people, and what we know is that of those 1,000, more than half of those individuals' cases were dismissed. And so on any given day, more than 800 people sit in jails, and the majority of them cannot pay bail. Now, what does this do, and how does this criminalize poverty? What it does, it creates an urgency in that person to plead guilty. Mm-hmm. And when that person pleads guilty and is represented by a court-appointed attorney or even a public defender, it just makes the case go away. But it doesn't take into account the history that adds to what this subject may be about, the barriers to re-entry. And so when you look at it, it's a money thing. Why do I say it's a money thing? Because even if it's the taxpayers footing the bill, $100 a day for people in jail, or if we're talking about the Tennessee Department of Corrections that with a budget of $1 billion, maybe 23, 24, 25,000 per person, or if we're talking about juveniles who are held inside of detention centers, $70,000 a year. I mean, we're talking about money. But the thing that we must do to answer your question is, first we have to frame what the criminal legal system is. You see? So right now, if we dated back to England, and we're talking about courts and the duel, and we look at how that still influences how cases are prosecuted in Tennessee. It's an adversarial system. So the reason we don't refer to it as the criminal justice system, because even for those who have been harmed, survivors of crime, they don't receive justice, because a system that believes in justice is going to take into account the psychology, the emotional damage of an individual that's been harmed by a person that we put in jail who is called an offender. That person who harmed someone else. What we are not doing is looking into that person's past, his background, her background, and understanding why he or she arrived to the point to where they thought that they should even commit a crime, or what we have deemed to be a crime. And so the first thing we think about, how much time can I give that person? How long can I lock that person up? So we have a punitive mentality. And the way I see it, we have to shift that mentality to how can we heal? And so when we have a criminal legal system that looks to the healing process, when a person's body is taken control of, whether in a jail, in a prison, there is some accountability by the state that that person does not leave more damaged than he or she was before he or she went into that system.
But we're seeing a lot of people leave more damaged, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
And so that has to be something that rises to the level of getting the entire community upset, concerned, ready to take action. All right, we're going to take a break and then come back, and I want to talk about what specifically. I feel like if you're watching this show, you care deeply about this. What can people do specifically? What are the things that they need to be focused on to really change this? Not talk about it, but change it.
Okay.
We'll take a break, and if you're on the line, hold on with your call. Take a break. We'll be back right after this.